Chapter 1. Buzz, buzz, buzz. Angus groaned and hugged the pillow closer to him. Maybe if he pretended to be asleep, the noise would just go away. Buzz, buzz. It stopped. But there was someone hammering on the wall. Or, no, it seemed to be closer. It seemed to be coming from inside his head. Buzz, buzz, buzz. Angus groaned again, stretched out his arm, and pulled the ringing phone to his ear. "Good morning, Angus," he heard Ross's voice say. "Or should that be good afternoon? How are you feeling?" "I'm dying. Leave me alone," was Angus's mumbled reply. "No, that wouldn't be much fun." Ross sounded like he was enjoying himself. Angus turned over, wincing as the sunlight hit his eyes. "What are you doing up so early? Why are you so cheerful?" "I'm not cheerful, it's just schadenfreude. And it's not early, it's 1 o'clock, and I've been up since 8. Some of us have real jobs, you know." "Uh-huh," was Angus's response. "So, you had a good time last night, then? Susie and you seemed to be having a good chat when I left." "Oh?" The mention of Susie's name had finally woken Angus up. "In fact, I was wondering if you know where she is. A body's been found, and everyone has to get to Arthur's Seat now." Angus pulled himself into a sitting position and rubbed his eyes while he tried to understand the implications of Ross's question. It took a moment, but then he felt himself blush to his ears. No, I've no idea where she is," he protested. Why? Can you not get hold of her?" "No, she's not answering her phone, so I put 2 and 2 together." Ross still sounded amused, but became serious. "But she really needs to come to work. The boss is not pleased. So if you hear from her—" "Of course. You said Arthur's Seat and a body?" "That's right. I'm heading over there now." "Okay, well, I hope you find Susie soon." "Right you are. Bye." Angus sat a moment, the phone quiet in his hand. A body on Arthur's Seat. Now, that didn't happen every day of the week. Maybe he'd walk up there himself, see what was going on. He might see Susie. And some fresh air would help his sore head. But first things first, he needed a cup of tea. 35 minutes later, Angus stumbled out of the front door of the Marchmont tenement he had lived in for a little over a year and began to walk in the direction of Newington. It was warmer than he had expected, and he was soon regretting the jacket he'd grabbed on his way out. He quickly forgot about that as he turned into Holyrood Park Road, and saw the police vans parked at the end, sirens off, but blue lights flashing. He was surprised that they were still there, as he had taken a long time to get ready. It must be very serious. As he neared the entrance to Holyrood Park, he could see a police tape barrier strung across the road and pavement. A group of students from the nearby university accommodation was smoking and texting. A couple of joggers had also paused and were chatting to an elderly couple. Off to the side was a young woman. She stood out with her amazing fiery red hair, which was blowing across her face in the breeze. It contrasted perfectly with her green dress, and Angus was momentarily distracted by this vision. He quickly turned his attention, however, to the men and women on the other side of the plastic barrier. Police officers, forensic scientists, and other miscellaneous people who had a job to do at a crime scene. He caught sight of Ross standing near a van talking to his superior. Looking around, he saw Susie approach them. So Ross had managed to find her. He watched as she greeted Ross and their chief, who didn't look very pleased. He gestured towards the crowd of people, and Susie started walking in their direction. As he waited for her to cross the 100 yards or so to where he and the others were standing, his attention was again diverted. This time to two paramedics carrying down a covered body, and a police officer pulling at the lead of a dog. The animal, a border collie, was tugging at its restraint and barking quite fiercely. The uniformed officer was clearly having some trouble keeping the dog under control. "Thank you, everyone. There's nothing to see here. Please be on your way and clear the area so that we can get on with our investigation." Susie seemed less than happy to have this task and stood with arms crossed as the collection of people moved off a few more yards. Job done, she turned to Angus. "Afternoon? What are you doing here then?" The tone was neutral, but there was a hint of a smile on her face. "Well, Ross woke me up, and so I thought I might as well come and have a look." Angus smiled and trailed to a halt. So, how are you?" "Couldn't be better." Angus nodded at the sarcasm and asked, "What happened here anyway?" "Now, Angus, you know I can't tell you anything. You'll just have to read about it in the paper. Besides, I'd better be getting on. See you later." "Yes, fine. Take care." Angus watched as Susie started to walk away. Behind her he could see the struggling officer and dog, which was still pulling at its lead. Angus imagined it desperately trying to return to its master's side. The story of Greyfriars Bobby, the dog who wouldn't leave his master's grave, coming to mind. And at that moment, the collie finally broke free of the young officer and went tearing off, dodging parked cars and outstretched arms, before vanishing into the undergrowth. There were shouts and arm-waving from the police officers, but nothing more of interest to see. Angus turned his back on the scene and wondered what he should do now. It was a lovely day, and he was in no hurry to return to his messy flat. He'd go for a walk and clear the cobwebs. Removing the too-warm jacket, he meandered off, with only one more glance at the action behind him, the mound of the crags and Arthur's Seat, bathed in the soft April sunlight. Chapter 2. Edinburgh had been Angus Fleming's home for 11 years now, but he hadn't lost the feeling of wonder at walking through its winding streets with their grey-yellow sandstone buildings, small gardens, and multitude of chimneys. He had arrived here as a naive 18-year-old, and the move from a small Hebridean island to this elegant and eerie city had been a shock to the system. In time, however, the streets, at least in the area around the university, had become as familiar to him as the paths he'd played on as a child growing up on Harris. Today he wasn't concentrating on the buildings, but was instead thinking about recent events. 9 months earlier, his first novel, a crime story, had been published and had been an instant success. After years of uncertainty about his future, it had come as a complete surprise and still hadn't really sunk in. He'd just returned from a few weeks of PR stuff in England. The party the night before had been in celebration of that, and now he had some time to recover from it all. His publisher wanted him to start work on the next book, but he didn't feel under pressure to get started. Plus, he had no idea what it should be about. Pushing those thoughts to one side, he remembered how touched he was that his friends, Ross especially, had organised a party for him. He smiled to himself. Everyone had been so complimentary, and Susie in particular had looked at him differently. Or at least so it had seemed to him. He just hoped he hadn't made a fool of himself. The end of the evening was a bit of a blur. Sighing, he stopped to work out where he was. Out of the corner of his eye, he caught sight of a black shape. It disappeared as he turned around. Was he still hungover? No. There it was again. 2 dark eyes, a pink tongue, and a quizzical expression. The lead hanging from its collar confirmed Angus's suspicion. The runaway dog. Now, would it let him catch it? Angus stood, eyes fixed on the dog. The dog stared back. They both seemed to be thinking. Then Angus raised his eyebrows. He'd had a brainwave. The dog sat down, intrigued by Angus's actions. He had lifted up his jacket and was patting the pockets, muttering to himself. "I'm sure it's still here. What did I do with it?" Before smiling. "Aha!" He pulled out a crumpled crisp bag, opened it, and lay it flat on the ground, the flattened contents letting off an appetizing aroma of salt and vinegar. He took a step back and waited. The dog looked at the crisp bag, looked at him, looked back at the bag, and after a brief hesitation, moved forward to lick up the tasty mixture, tail wagging. Angus saw his chance and picked up the end of the lead. The dog raised its head again, but with a seemingly defeated air, finished off the crisps before letting Angus quietly lead him down the road. Chapter 3. Walking back the way he had come, Angus could see police officers clustered around the police station on St. Leonard Street. Ross and Susie were there too. They spotted him with the dog, and a small group came to meet him a few steps away from the station. The dog started whining, then began barking again. "How do you find her? We've been looking everywhere," asked a young officer, taking the lead from Angus. The dog pulled on it. "Well, I was just walking through Dumbydykes when I—" Angus didn't get any further, because everyone turned to watch as a car drew up. An elegant woman, her face set tight in disbelief, got out. Susie muttered, "That must be the wife." Beside them, the dog's barking grew louder, and it pulled at the lead. Taking the officer by surprise, it once again got free and ran in the direction of the woman. She turned and was greeted by outstretched paws, a wagging tail, and silence. Angus frowned slightly, but before he could articulate his thoughts, the quietness of the dog around somebody it knew, the others were patting him on the back. "Well done, Angus," and wandering off back to their duties. "I'll give you a call later. Thanks for your help," Ross shouted over his shoulder, and was gone. Angus stuck his hands, now free of a lead, in his pockets, his jacket slung over the crook of his arm, shrugged, and turned towards home. He was hungry, so he popped into a cafe for something to eat before walking over the meadows. As he crossed the grass on his way to Jawbone Walk, he spotted the red-haired girl from earlier. The intensity of the colour combined with the emerald green dress she was wearing made her unmistakable. She was standing at the edge of the path talking to a young man. Something in her body language, her shoulders hunched, one arm held tight around herself, said here was someone who was unhappy. There was something else about her posture that reminded Angus of something, but he couldn't pinpoint what. As he walked past them, he caught bits of what they were saying. From her, "I can't believe he's gone. What am I going to do?" And him, "You're well rid of—" When he was safely past them, Angus stopped and turned back. But they had also started walking, going up the hill towards George IV Bridge, her long red hair moving in rhythm to her step.